We navigate human experience as if it were a fully furnished room. We operate under the assumption that we are enduring selves making free choices, interacting with solid objects, and navigating objective moral facts. Bry Willis looks at this intuitive setup and applies a method called diagnostic anti-foundationalism. Before constructing new theories to explain how these pieces fit together, he inspects the architecture that created the pieces in the first place. He argues that traditional philosophy repeatedly falls into a specific trap. It mistakes the consequences of our own conceptual arrangements for deep, pre-existing features of reality. He defines this error as metaphysical inflation, or promotion beyond evidence. Humans create highly useful cognitive compressions to manage complex information, and then illegitimately upgrade those compressions into foundational substances. We will construct a complete, robust model of reality and society using Willis's 10 coordinates. We will build this model entirely out of relational events, without ever relying on the concept of substance. Taking apart these inherited structures is not an exercise in nihilism. This phase of disintegration is a necessary clearing of illusions to reveal how human reality actually functions, stabilizes, and sustains itself. The standard view of the universe relies on substance ontology. This is the assumption that reality is composed of discrete, self-standing things that possess properties and later bump into each other to form relations. The alternative is mediated encounter realism. Structured relational encounters are the primary material of the universe. The entities within them are derivative. A chair, an electron, or a person contains no solid, self-grounding core. They are stable abstractions drawn from these relational events. Because reality is an encounter, every access point to it is heavily mediated. There is no view from nowhere. We cannot access an unfiltered conceptual aperture where reality sits perfectly independent of biology, history, or language. To solve this, Willis utilizes economist Amartya Sen's distinction between positional and transpositional objectivity. True objectivity must be built from specific, mediated viewpoints, rather than from an imaginary vantage point outside the universe. Willis calls this convergence realism. Reality is the disciplined pressure that continues to assert itself across divergent perspectives and instruments. We can achieve rigorous scientific objectivity by identifying cross-perspectival stability. We do not need to slip behind the curtain to photograph the ultimate furniture of the universe to know that the constraints of physics are real. Scaling up from physical matter to the human realm, we confront a heavy piece of metaphysical baggage. We assume human beings possess a persistent entity, a self, that travels intact through time. Willis categorizes the first-person perspective as episodic indexicalism. The I is an indexical compression, marking the active present locus of perspective. The diachronic self is a broad narrative and institutional compression. It operates like legal inheritance, tracking liabilities across time without requiring a metaphysical core. We misunderstand this continuity because our syntax forces us to segment the world incorrectly, a trap Willis calls ontological grammar. We routinely commit an error called authoring displacement. We compress a complex downstream pattern of conduct into a single noun, like intent or will, and then move that noun upstream to act as the cause of the very behavior it describes. What begins as a highly useful institutional handle is inverted into an imaginary piece of inward furniture. This distinction heavily impacts the ethics of the justice system. Under a framework of anti-retributive instrumentalism, institutions utilize terms like choice and capacity because they are administratively necessary to predict danger and manage society. Using agency language to protect society from recurring harm does not prove the existence of a self-originating inner author who owes retributive suffering as a moral payment. These episodic selves rely on a communication protocol to coordinate. Willis outlines the structural limits of this protocol through the language insufficiency hypothesis. This chart maps his effectiveness complexity gradient, demonstrating that linguistic effectiveness sharply decays as conceptual load increases. Terms for objects act as stable invariants. As load increases, we enter contestables like justice, fluids like consciousness, and ineffables where language collapses. We routinely demand rigid precision from complex philosophical terms that their structure cannot bear. We mistake grammatical fluency for shared semantic reference. This linguistic breakdown clarifies the persistence of moral disputes. Willis applies moral non-cognitivism, stating that moral propositions do not report independently existing moral facts. Instead, moral terms express ontological orientations. These are deeply inherited structures of salience that dictate exactly how a person weights variables like harm, loyalty, and autonomy. Two groups can perfectly agree on the physical facts of an event and remain violently opposed over what that event actually is. The conflict survives factual agreement because morality is rooted in competing orientations, stripping our preferences of celestial notarization. If language structurally fails under pressure and moral orientations diverge at the root level, society must find a way to avoid total gridlock. Institutions are forced into action at the precise coordinates where vocabulary and values fail to converge. Willis describes their true function as maintenance over resolution. Legal and political procedures do not actually reconcile incompatible worldviews. Institutions collapse plurality into a singular outcome. They dampen variance and distribute loss to prevent catastrophic collision between competing orientations. This identical diagnostic framework cuts through the debate surrounding artificial intelligence and the philosophy of mind. Taking a stance of anti-exceptionalist apophaticism, Willis points out that human minds are never directly observed. We attribute a mind to another person based entirely on patterned competence and behavior. Yet when a machine displays similar competence, we apply metaphysical plot armor to humans. We treat biological opacity as profound depth, while dismissing machine opacity as mimicry. Human political institutions and human consciousness lack pure, magical legitimacy. Both are highly stabilized patterns that society elevates to absolutes for the sake of comfort. Willis's provisional map outlines a complete ecosystem. A network of relational encounters solidifies into episodic selves, communicating through lossy language, managed by rigid institutional boxes. Across every discipline, human thought falls into the same cognitive operation. We create a useful compression, we form a habit around it, we mistake its utility for successful reference, and we elevate it into a primitive substance. Rigorous philosophy requires strict resistance to this promotion beyond evidence. This framework is highly deflationary, but it does not dismiss the human experience. Reversing these metaphysical elevations leaves the practical structures of society completely functional. We manage dangerous behavior and protect populations without needing an enduring metaphysical soul. We brutally condemn cruelty and domination without requiring an objective moral property for detection. Biological vulnerability, affective regulation, and existential exposure provide severe endogenous stakes. We do not require invisible essences to anchor our existence. Reality is a mediated encounter. We can abandon the search for impossible foundations and find intellectual clarity to navigate the world using a provisional map.